That is where we start this hour with Congressman Ted Lieu, Democrat of California, a House impeachment manager during the ex-president's second impeachment trial, as well as a member of the House Judiciary and Foreign Affairs Committee. First, Congressman, thank you for joining us, and I love your reaction to what we all learned last night in the New York Times.
Thank you, Nicole. Authoritarian governments try to silence their critics, such as journalists and elected officials, by seizing records and monitoring their contacts. We're the United States of America. We should not be doing this. The Department of Justice should not have done this. And anyone involved, and I agree with Representative Swalwell, needs to resign because they don't understand the separation of powers. They don't understand what a huge scandal this is. We need to get to the bottom of it.
Well, Congressman, the New York Times reports at least 4 individuals who were involved in different pieces of leak investigations. There was someone who they describe as having no relevant experience, who was flown in by Barr from New Jersey to spearhead these probes. He's still there. Mr. Demers, who headed the National Security Division under Mr. Barr, is now there doing the same job under Merrick Garland. Would you like to see these individuals suspended while an investigation is conducted?
Yes. These folks at the Justice Department, every one of them, including Merrick Garland, took an oath. That oath was not to the president. It was not to the office of the president. It was to the Constitution of the United States. And for this scandal to have happened tells me that there are many people involved in this scandal who do not understand the oath they took. It is to respect the Constitution, not to maximize presidential power. And so we need to get to the bottom of this, have hearings, have Barr and Sessions and others testify.
I have a weird question. Congressman Schiff makes clear that Apple sent out emails, and he said some people may have been involved and not even know it because they might have thought that Apple's emails were spam. Why didn't anyone from the Garland Justice Department call all of you on the committee?
That is a great question. I don't know their answer to that. The Department of Justice also knew about what happened for years, including this year. Why is it that all of a sudden they're now having a Inspector General investigation? They called for it, which, by the way, is a good step, because of the free press, because this was disclosed to the public. That is not how the Garland DOJ should be working. They should be trying to do the right thing, not only when the press exposes misconduct.
Well, I mean, along those lines, Congressman, they've also been in court until this month pursuing data from journalists. I want to show you something Congressman Schiff said that's very much in line with the things you're saying right now about the need to clean house. Let's watch. We'll talk about it on the other side.
I think that the Attorney General has an obligation to clean house, to essentially understand exactly what the department was doing over the last 4 years, make sure that there's accountability for those that were engaged in political and partisan investigations within the department. And, you know, in terms of the oversight by Congress, I don't think I have a role in that, given that some of my records were apparently the subject of a subpoena. But I think other committees, as part of their oversight responsibilities, ought to ask the Attorney General and others. And I do think the department needs to do a wholesale review of the politicization of these cases over the last 4 years.
First of all, do you agree with that description of what is needed right now, today, a cleaning of house and a wholesale review of the politics that were involved in criminal cases?
I completely agree with Chairman Schiff. And let me just walk through a few examples. This spying on members of Congress and trying to get metadata and other information is a gross abuse of presidential power that the Department of Justice engaged in. I also believe it's a gross abuse of presidential power to have Department of Justice attorneys protect and represent Donald Trump in a rape defamation lawsuit of E. Jean Carroll. It's also a gross abuse of presidential power to not release the Bill Barr memo, where he basically lied about what was in the Mueller report. And in each case, you've got the Garland Department of Justice enabling this abuse of presidential power. This Department of Justice won't even acknowledge that congressional subpoenas are valid. So we need the Attorney General of the United States to really take a look at the oath he took. It was to the Constitution. It's not to maximize abuses of the office of the president.
Yeah, those two cases are cited to me as well by legal scholars who say they have nothing to do with defending laws on the books. As you said, one is defending an ex-president in an allegation of rape and defamation. The other, a bad faith move, so bad that Robert Mueller, who seems very reluctant to speak out on anything, called him to complain. Congressman Ted Lieu, I hope we can continue to call on you in this really rapidly developing story after the news broke last night. Thank you so much for starting us off this hour.
Thank you.